Airports are supposed to feel safe, but on that morning, all safety disappeared in an instant. A little black girl stood in the middle of Terminal C, small, quiet, clutching a pink backpack that looked almost bigger than her. Around her, the echo of barking dogs filled the air. 1, 2, then 10, 14 police dogs, straining against their leashes, circling closer and closer. Travelers stopped walking. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "What did she do?" Another voice snapped, "Stay back, it's dangerous." But the girl didn't move. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide, not from guilt, but from fear. An officer shouted, "Hands where I can see them!" Another yelled, "Don't reach into the bag!" The dogs barked louder. Her small fingers tightened around the strap as tears welled up. No one stepped forward to help her. Not one, and yet, just a few feet away, a man in uniform was sprinting toward the chaos, his heart racing, his face pale. Because the voice on his radio had just said words that made his world stop spinning. "Sir, it's her. The little girl surrounded by your men is your daughter." What happened in the next 60 seconds would leave the entire airport, and every officer in it, speechless. Her name was Amira Johnson, 11 years old, soft-spoken, and full of wonder. It was her very first flight alone. Her mother lived in Chicago. Her father worked long hours in another city. So this trip meant everything to her. A reunion, a chance to feel home again. She had spent the night before packing carefully. Her favorite book, a teddy bear missing one ear, and a photo of her parents holding her at graduation day. That's all she carried. Nothing more. But the world didn't see an innocent traveler. The world saw a little black girl walking alone, nervous, quiet, holding a bag too tight. When she stepped into the airport, people's eyes lingered longer than they should have. The ticket agent smiled at the family ahead of her, but barely glanced when it was her turn. Security officers spoke louder, slower, as if she wouldn't understand them. Still, Amira smiled, whispered thank you, and kept moving. Her father had taught her something she never forgot. Baby girl, some people will see your skin before they see your heart. Don't let that change the way you walk. So she walked tall, even though her heart raced beneath that little pink jacket. She didn't know it yet, but before the day ended, the entire nation would know her name. Amira placed her backpack on the security belt, just like everyone else. She waited patiently, feet barely touching the floor from the tall airport chair. The conveyor belt moved, then suddenly stopped. The scanner beeped. A sharp, uneasy sound. 2 officers stepped forward, whispering to each other. "Whose bag is this?" one asked. Amira raised her hand shyly. "Mine, sir," the officer frowned. "You traveling alone?" "Yes. My daddy bought my ticket." He nodded but didn't smile. He called for a supervisor. Then another, and soon the simple moment turned into something heavy. Something wrong. A 3rd officer arrived with a K9 unit. Then 2, then 5. Before anyone understood why, 14 dogs stood around her in a wide circle. People began recording. Some chuckled quietly, others shook their heads. Amira's eyes darted around. She didn't know what to say. A woman nearby whispered, "Poor thing. She looks terrified." The lead officer spoke firmly, "Step away from the bag." Amira's small voice broke through the noise, trembling. "Did I do something wrong?" No one answered. They only tightened their grip on the leashes, and as the barking filled the air, Amira closed her eyes, remembering her father's voice again. Stay polite. Stay calm. People judge faster than they listen. If only they'd listened. They'd have known that the badge in her backpack didn't belong to a criminal. It belonged to the chief of police. The barking grew louder. 14 dogs, 14 leashes, 14 angry mouths ready to bite on command. Hands up! One officer shouted. "Don't touch that bag." Another yelled. Amira froze. Her small hands lifted slowly into the air. Tears streaked down her cheeks. The crowd gasped. Some pulled out phones to record. One man said under his breath, "This is too much. She's a child." Another replied, "They think she's carrying something." A woman tried to step forward, but a cop blocked her way. "Ma'am, stay back." "For your safety." Amira looked up at them, faces stern, eyes cold. "Please." "I didn't do anything," she whispered, but no one listened. The world had already judged her, because of her skin, her silence, her fear. An officer kicked the pink backpack gently with his boot. Nothing moved. Still, he barked, "Get the dogs closer." A chorus of growls filled the terminal. Amira's lip trembled. She took a tiny step back. "Stay still!" A voice thundered. The little girl stood there, surrounded, alone, and humiliated. Even the announcer's voice over the speakers seemed to fade away, and then the world shifted. From across the terminal, the sound of heavy boots echoed, fast, urgent, angry. Someone shouted, "Everyone stand down!" Heads turned. Cameras pointed. The officers looked confused as a man in uniform ran toward them, his face pale, his jaw clenched tight. He pushed past the crowd, shouting again, "What in God's name are you doing?" "That's my daughter." The terminal fell silent. The barking stopped, and the truth was finally about to explode. The crowd stood frozen. No one moved, not even the dogs. The man in uniform, the police chief himself, knelt beside the trembling little girl. "Amira." His voice cracked, barely a whisper. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw him. "Daddy?" He turned sharply toward the stunned officers, his face dark with disbelief. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. No one answered. One of the sergeants stammered, "Sir, we were told she matched a suspect description." The scanner! The chief snapped. "That's a child." "My child." He yanked open her pink backpack, revealing the small leather wallet he'd given her that morning. Inside it, a note with his own badge number and a photo of them together. The sergeant's face went pale. He grabbed his radio, voice trembling. "Control, cancel everything. Immediate stand down." The chief gently lifted his daughter's face. "Did they hurt you?" She shook her head, still scared. "I didn't mean to make them mad." He pulled her close, one arm around her. "You did nothing wrong, baby." Nothing at all. The terminal was silent. Every officer now realized who they had just humiliated. The chief's voice dropped low, deadly calm. "Call internal affairs. Every officer here is to be questioned. And those dogs, remove them, now." No one argued. The authority in his voice cut through the air like thunder. In less than a minute, the chaos that began with fear now turned into shame. Word spread through the airport like wildfire. By the time the chief stood up with his daughter, news reporters were already on their way. He looked around at the dozens of passengers staring, some still recording. The same voices that once whispered, "What did she do?" now murmured, "That's his daughter?" The chief turned to the officers once more. "You pointed weapons at an 11-year-old girl," he said quietly. "You surrounded her with dogs. Did no one stop to ask why?" Silence. Not one of them met his eyes. He sighed deeply, voice breaking. "I've spent my life teaching this department to protect people, not terrify them." He took Amira's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. We're going home." As they walked out, the crowd parted, whispering apologies, some even crying. Amira looked up at her father. "Daddy, are you mad at them?" He hesitated. "I'm disappointed. But anger doesn't fix what's broken." "We'll fix it. Together." Behind them, one officer whispered to another, "We just made the biggest mistake of our careers." He wasn't wrong. That evening, the video went viral. Millions watched the moment a little black girl faced 14 police dogs and never flinched. And for the first time in a long time, people didn't just see a uniform. They saw a father, a child, and the truth that can't be buried under silence. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Police detain chief's daughter at airport. Little girl surrounded by dogs sparks nationwide debate. TV anchors spoke her name. Social media overflowed with outrage and empathy. At a press conference, the chief stood beside Amira, cameras flashing. He cleared his throat, voice steady. "What happened to my daughter should never happen to anyone's child. The problem isn't just protocol, it's perception. Fear should never replace judgment." He placed a gentle hand on Amira's shoulder. "She forgave those officers before I did. That's strength." Amira looked up at the crowd and said softly, "Sometimes people act mean because they're scared. But being scared doesn't make it right." Reporters went silent. Some even smiled faintly. Her innocence spoke louder than all the microphones in the room. The chief promised mandatory retraining for his department and new rules on racial bias awareness. The story wasn't just about a mistake. It was about accountability and Amira. She didn't just become a name in the news. She became a symbol of how courage, even when small, can spark change across an entire nation. The world moved on, but not entirely. In that airport, there's still a faint mark on the floor where Amira once stood surrounded by dogs. Some say it's just a shadow. Others say it's a reminder that innocence should never be mistaken for threat, that skin color should never decide danger, that one quiet voice can expose the loudest injustice. Amira went back to school a few weeks later. Her classmates asked, "Were you scared?" She smiled and said, "A little, but my dad taught me to stand still when the world gets loud." And that became her strength. Her father, the chief, changed more than just policies. He changed hearts, because when officers looked at a child after that day, they didn't just see a traveler, and they saw someone's daughter. The narrator's voice softens. Sometimes, the smallest person in the room holds the greatest power, the power to remind us what humanity looks like. As the story closes, Amira's laughter echoes faintly. The fear that once filled the air is gone. What's left is something stronger, understanding, and in the end, that's what this world needs most. Not bigger voices, not louder orders, just better hearts. Because that day at the airport didn't just change a girl's life, it changed how an entire city saw the truth. If Amira's story moved you, share this video, because stories like hers deserve to be heard. Leave a comment below with one word to describe how this made you feel. And remember, every story has a heartbeat. And here at Black Book Stories, we make sure it's never forgotten.